Mac, people nowadays, they're just always complaining. Everything's going to shit now. No one likes anything. We're in the worst possible future. I disagree. Do you remember as a child, as a maybe preteen, that we were advertised that Dippin' Dots were the ice cream of the future? Thank God we avoided that.
I like to subscribe to the Limp Bizkit. It's all about the he said, she said bullshit,
Mhm.
You think back to those all-time great lyrics. It should have won maybe a Nobel Peace Prize. The accuracy of that song, despite it being a Limp Bizkit song, pretty good. Pretty good. A lot of bullshit going on these days, and included in the bullshit over the last quarter century. Dippin' Dots. Dippin' Dots are fine. Dippin' Dots are a novelty. You have a cup of Dippin' Dots, you're like, that's a little unique. You're like, it doesn't replace regular ice cream though. Like I would prefer regular ice cream with like a chunk of Oreo in it, a chunk of cookie. Dippin' Dots is good maybe for the elderly who can't really chew and it's just gonna melt.
Could you imagine going to a Friendly's, a Brigham's, any of these ice cream parlors, a Richardson's, if you will, and you go up there and you order an ice cream and they hand you a little tub of dots, and that's the future that we live in?
Yeah, it just comes out in like a soda machine style type of thing, all dots.
Truly the audacity of claiming that this little nitrogen flash frozen dot is going to replace maybe the best thing on earth.
I'm gonna blame Canopy Lake Park for this whole thing because that's the first time I ever saw it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One, two, three, yeah! Goo! Jaws 3! Goo! King of Queens! Goo! Meryl Streep! Entertainment!
I'm Goo.
And I'm Mac.
And we are the Mac and Goo program. We bring you friendship.
Yes, and one of the very one of the core values of Goo and I's friendship is a mutual love for SNL, growing up on SNL, a very specific version of SNL for Goo and I, since we were both born in the year 1989. However, it's the idea of SNL, I think, more so that Goo and I agree on, and it's something that my father shared with me growing up. Same thing with Goo. Him and his family watched SNL, and so SNL has been very formative to us over the years. And this past weekend, I actually still have yet to watch. I'm excited to watch it today. SNL 50, Goo. And I haven't heard reviews of the show specifically, but I heard that the music set, the little concert they put on in honor of it, was fantastic.
Oh, the Friday night thing? Yeah, I'll give you my thoughts on the whole weekend in your sack, if you don't mind. I'd like to get to the topic at hand. First things first, live from Goo York, this is a podcast. That's what they do at the opening of their shows. Do you remember that?
I'm a big point and wave guy, even if you don't know.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Today, what we're going to do is we are going to, because the 50th anniversary, I wanted to find a way to honor 50 cast members of the show without just doing a countdown, without, me and you top 10 list. And I think this is a kind of unique way in saying that people do this all the time.
Yeah, Goo, and this is you and your sister actually helped out a great deal. You're more of a historian of the show than I am, that's for sure. More educated on the outside times other than when we were growing up. And so what Goo did is put together a list, a build your own cast type of list. We have 10 categories, and as you may note, SNL cast is always quite big, but usually a core of like 8 to 10 during the show is when it's at its best. And so we have 10 categories here. For example, you have an anchor character, you have a physical comedy character, and we're going to go through there and give you 5 possibilities, and with an impending graphic that you'll see online with dollar values 1 to 5. And we're going to ask you to build a lineup based off what we give you here today.
Right. So you'll have $30. You will want to listen through all the categories, how much all these cast members are worth, or you can check out the graphic later. And then tell me, with these 10 categories, your cast lineup. And you can't skip any categories. You got to fill them all in. You can't have like 2 or 3 $5 ones and say, I'm going to have a 3-man show. Not allowed. You need all 10. Once again, $30, fill out your lineup.
Yes.
And not to brag, Mac mentioned I'm a historian on SNL. Brag. I would say that I have seen every sketch from 1988 on.
Yeah, I would confirm that based on references and things you've tried to bring up in the past that go right over my head. I would say I've probably seen every sketch from between like 1998 and 2008. And
Yeah.
outside of that, I've seen like all the best ones. But that's really my era, is like 98 to 08 is when I'm really honed in on SNL. And anything outside of that, I'm aware of, but I'm not really an expert, I guess I would say.
And like, I'm not even a huge fan of what the current show is or the past couple years. It's just out of habit. On Sundays, you watch SNL. That's what I do. with my wife.
And you know what? An addendum to what I just said. I guess I'm more aware of the show now since we've been doing this podcast. And I also feel like they've had some really good cast members over the last 15 or so years. Maybe the show itself maybe hasn't been great, but there's been some really great individual cast members.
I also subscribe to, however old you are when you liked your first cast, you think that that's the best cast. But on the whole, it's pretty much always the same.
Yeah, I would totally agree. It'll be interesting to hear other people's thoughts on this. I do think a lot of our listeners are the same age as us, or in the same realm. My dad, for example, huge Eddie Murphy guy, but I think even he would admit that the Will Ferrell peak, because of not only Ferrell but the other cast members involved, might challenge the Eddie Murphy era for best era of SNL.
Because I think when I first started watching the show, it was on Comedy Central, and I really watched a ton of those 88 through 93, the Sandler, Spade, Carvey, Myers years, and that's kind of my first introduction to the show. But then, when it was live, when I was at that age that I would watch the show, it was the end of the Ferrell, leading into, the Tina Fey, Jimmy Fallon, and then into the 05 crop. That's an all-time crop.
Yeah, that's a good summation, I think.
So without any further ado, shall we start with our anchor cast member?
Let's do it.
I start at the bottom or the top?
Start at the bottom. We'll go $1 to $5.
So I'm not the biggest fan of this cast member, but I'm not gonna, she played a huge part on this show for 11 years, I believe, from 2012 until 2022. I don't know how years work, but it is Kate McKinnon, who did impressions like Hillary Clinton, Rudy Giuliani, Ellen, Justin Bieber, Jane Lynch, Penelope Cruz. That's actually how she got on the show. That was in her audition. But then she also did characters like Colleen Rafferty. That's the alien lady that they had in the 50th anniversary. Barbara Drew. I don't know. She played a lot of old ladies. That was one of her things. Russian ladies and old ladies. That was her go-to for characters. But, you can't deny what she meant to the show. So $1 as an anchor cast member.
Yeah, she was significant. She had a quasi-historic run on the show in that she was the lead for a really, really long time.
Yeah.
You could argue one of the worst spans for SNL, but she was still the lead, whether the show was good or not. I think she's a victim of that era, because if she was in another era with maybe equally as talented folks, she could have been not featured as much and maybe had
not the
better
quality 3 starter in the rotation.
Yeah, more quality over quantity. Goo and I are not a huge fan of her, but she deserves, I think, to be the $1 in the anchor lineup here.
Maybe the steal of the draft, and he was going to be in the impressions group, but then you look at the characters that he also had on the show. By the way, writers are very important. Let's not ignore that right now. But the characters that he brought to life, and that is Bill Hader, who was on the show from 05 to 13, Stefan, Devin from the Californians, Vinny Viducci, Herb Welsh is the old reporter that would bonk you on the head, and Bill Topinski. Then you go to the impressions.
Yeah, go
One
ahead,
of
go
the
ahead.
best impressionists of all time on the show, Al Pacino, Clint Eastwood, Dave Matthews, David Bowie, Harvey Fierstein, Vincent Price. He cornered the market on those like 1950s, 1960s characters, those
Yeah.
impressions. Lindsey Buckingham, yes, he never said anything, but that's always hilarious. And then Keith Morrison, that's the Dateline host. He would look for people that no one else was doing impressions of that he found funny, and then he would bring them to life.
Yeah, I love, love, love Bill Hader. The only thing I would say, and I think why he's down here too and not in the top 3, is I don't know if he ever had the high highs of the 3 above him. As good as Bill Hader is,
Mhm.
I honestly think my favorite part about Bill Hader is Bill Hader breaking. Might be the funniest SNL cast member that breaks, and that also comes into consideration here too. There's a lot of people that like don't like when characters break and are real, sketch
It has
comedy
to be earned.
purists.
It has
Yeah,
to be earned. You can't
yeah,
just do it.
yeah, yeah. The Jimmy Fallon effect, I
Yes.
suppose. But when Hader breaks, there's literally nothing better. And I think, as you'll see as we go through these 10 categories, there was some back and forth discussion about, okay, maybe this person also could have been an anchor, but we'll put him here. Hader's one of those guys, and anyone that's on the anchor list could have been in any of these categories, but I think well deserved here. And I also believe wholeheartedly greater than Kate McKinnon, so deservingly above her here.
For $3 and originally once again in the Impressionist, but this guy brought the show back from the possibility of being canceled. And then when he left, it almost got canceled again. And that is Dana Carvey, who was on the show from 86 to 93. He also dabbles a little bit now. But characters like the Broccoli Chopper, Church Lady, Grumpy Old Man, Garth. Ever hear of Garth, Mac?
Yeah, I've heard of that character once or twice.
Hans, Massive Head Wound Harry. And then politically, he carried the show with his impressions like George H.W. Bush, Ross Perot. They would have to tape him doing one, and then they would put it side by side and use David Spade as a stand-in when they weren't using Carvey as the other one.
I think Carvey is the quintessential, like, comedian's comedian. The SNL character, the SNL cast member. Like, the
Yeah.
two above him, I think, deserve to be the top 2. But I think if you polled anyone that's ever worked with all these people, they'd probably say Dana Carvey is the funniest person that's ever been on SNL.
Casey Kasem, Johnny Carson, George Michael, Jimmy Stewart, Joe Biden. And he also, what I love is, so he's gone on like Conan's podcast, and he probably does it on his own podcast as well, as he breaks down how he gets into the impressions and like his reasoning for why certain people sound a certain way. Like he was talking about doing an impression of Jeff Bridges, and he's like, he always seems like he just had a really big ham dinner and he's fixing his belt. I'm like, what the fuck? But then you listen to him do it and you go, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
It is weird, and that's like that speaks to a mindset and a talent that we don't possess. But being able to think of a character like that and putting yourself in that mindset is amazing. And Dana Carvey is probably responsible for my first ever introduction to SNL. YouTube obviously didn't exist at the time, but my mother and my aunt loved Dana Carvey and their favorite sketch ever, and they still laugh about it to this day. My mom does. Just chopping broccoli. So they used to reference that when I was a kid. Had no idea what it was, obviously, until years and years later. And so Dana Carvey always has a soft spot for me.
For $4, and I feel like a lot of people might go this way to get a couple extra bucks going elsewhere, and that is Eddie Murphy, who dominated the show completely. A young Eddie Murphy from 1980 until 84. Buckwheat, Gumby, Mr. Robinson, Velvet Jones. The White Like Me sketch is an all-time classic as well. And then he did impressions like Bill Cosby, James Brown, Sammy Davis Jr., and Stevie Wonder. The Stevie Wonder impression, Stevie Wonder loved it. It was so good.
Eddie Murphy is a lot of people's hashtag GOAT, greatest of all time. However, he had been off the show for 5 years by the time Goo and I came onto this earth. This is no disrespect to Eddie Murphy. This is just Goo and I growing up with the number 1 guy, but recognizing how significant number 2 is. And it's fucking incredible that a 19-year-old Eddie Murphy got onto this show and dominated this type of comedy for 4 or 5 years, like far and away the best in the business at fucking 19, 20 years old. It's insane.
And then guys like Eddie Murphy, and we'll get to some more later on, but people that are able to do impressions and sing at the same time just blows me away.
Yeah, multi-talented, and
Yeah.
and that's really what comes down. I think what defines our 5 anchors here is how widespread their talents were. They weren't just good at one thing. They were good at
Yes.
everything
Everything.
and anything the show asked them to do.
And for $5, the number one anchor that you could grab, and I think might be worth all of this money, is someone that had 3 best ofs. He was that good on the show from 95 until 02, and that is Will Ferrell. You had Cowbell, Spartan Cheerleaders, Roger Clarvin, that's the love character, Marty Culp, who I forgot was so funny. The Marty Culp singing with Anna Gasteyer character is hilarious. Steve Butabi, get off the shed. Jeffrey's supervisor, Dr. Beeman. He's the one who lost Molly Shannon's baby, that all-time sketch. And then his impressions, he was not a good impressionist. But what he did, like so many classic SNL alumni, is that he would find something to hone in on and pull the humor from. Like with George H.W. Bush. He did not do the best W impression, but he made a character of him. Saddam Hussein, Janet Reno. Janet Reno's Dance Party is an all-time classic.
So good. And
Alex Trebek.
yeah, Goulet. It's just everything he did was funny. Everything he touched was funny, and he had a rare ability of combining the physical, like obviously Chris Farley, you could maybe argue is the greatest physical comedian they had, but Will Ferrell was every bit as funny physically combined with everything else. He didn't have to rely on it. It was just an added thing to all his stuff. His like hour and a half, and it's not technically SNL, but his hour and a half George Bush Broadway show is fucking amazing. It's a one-man show. He's got a slideshow, and he keeps coming back to this bit where there's a dick pic in it. One of his own dick pics, and it fucking kills me. Will Ferrell is my favorite SNL cast member of all time, but like Goose said at the top, when Will Ferrell got on the show, I was 6, 7 years old. When he left the show, I was 13 years old. That's like your most impressionable stage, especially when it comes to comedy and being exposed to things like that. So I don't think anyone will ever top Will Ferrell's heights on SNL, or you could argue Eddie Murphy's whatever area where, to me, these are the clear top 2 anchors.
So once again, the anchor. This might be the most important of all of these categories, so keep that in mind when you're spending your money. At $1 is Kate McKinnon, $2 Bill Hader, Dana Carvey at $3, Eddie Murphy at $4, and for $5 is Will Ferrell. Let's move on to the straight man, the guy that he doesn't always need to deliver the jokes, but he's there and he'll give you an answer for you to then make a funny going back. Let's start at the bottom here. And I'm looking at Beck Bennett, who was on the show from 2013 until 2021. My favorite character that he did, not necessarily a straight man character, is he was a man with the body of a baby. That always made me laugh. But countless dads, teachers, or whatever you needed in the background of a sketch to make someone else funny. He also did the My Pillow guy, Mike Pence, and Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, Beck Bennett is one of the most solid cast members they've ever had. To me, he's sort of poor man's is not the way to do it, but a working class man's version of this next guy at $2.
Yeah, this next guy, if I'm strapped for cash, I might go with. Known as the Iceman because he was impossible to break, is Chris Parnell from 1998 until 06. He was actually fired in the middle of his stint, and he was brought back because Will Ferrell forced them to.
That's right.
Merv the Perv is one of my favorite sketches that they don't want to do anymore. And then he was also a very funny rapper when they would have him on there as well. But he was the bad George W. Bush, and he did an amazing Tom Brokaw.
Yes, he did. Yeah. I think he's obviously best known for the Lonely Island.
Lazy Sunday.
Lazy Sunday. But Chris Parnell was so crucial to being that foil during the Will Ferrell era.
During the start of the show, you had stars like Chevy Chase, John Belushi, Bill Murray when he stepped in there. But the constant, the guy in there that, he was the backbone of the show, you would say, is Dan Aykroyd, who would give you characters like the fast-talking salesman or Wild and Crazy Guys or Elwood Blues. Not the funny one. He's the other one. And then you got Jimmy Carter, JFK, Julia Childs. That might be his funniest of his impressions with all the blood and then passing out. Richard Nixon as well. So he'd provide you a president.
Yeah, Aykroyd is not for me.
No.
However, when he was funny, he was very funny. I just don't care for this fella.
The most recent of these guys that I think belongs in this category is Jason Sudeikis, who has achieved a lot of success off the show since. But from 05 to 13, he played characters like the A-hole, the devil, Jesus. I don't know anyone else that could play both of those guys, but he did. Officer Sikorsky, that's the this is real officer. And what he would do very sneakily in all those sketches, he'd get everyone to break, is that he would jump as high as he could back onto the desk and get a giant thump. And it cracked everyone every single time. Doug, long drag from a cigarette and then say, okay, Rice. White Bernie Mac. Love White Bernie Mac. ESPN's Pete Twinkle. Countless teachers and dads. And then for impressions, Joe Biden and Wolf Blitzer, along with another bunch of faceless white men.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Sudeikis. He actually, kind of what you were saying about Will Ferrell, where Sudeikis, when he would do an impression, was sort of just doing Sudeikis, but in that character. Like it wasn't the great impression, but the way he did it was great because of Jason Sudeikis. So he was always very funny.
And for $5, you could argue that this guy could have been in the Anchors, that you could replace Dana Carvey with him possibly, because it was a 1A, 1B. And that was Phil Hartman from 86 to 94. He did characters like Frankenstein, Unfrozen Caveman Lawyer, constantly the dad of a sketch, helping out everyone else to get their laughs. And then impressions. He is such a great impressionist as well.
Mm-hmm.
Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jack Nicholson.
Yeah, a well-deserved $5 straight man here. And I guess the question would be here, would you rather be the $5 straight man or the $3 anchor? It's up for debate.
So once again, for $1, Beck Bennett, $2, Chris Parnell, $3, Dan Aykroyd, $4, Jason Sudeikis, and for $5 in the straight man category, Phil Hartman. Now let's move on to the category a little outside the box. Not what you expect from the show. Maybe a little more obscurist humor, abstract.
These are the types of characters and sketches that really build like a cult following, and maybe in the moment didn't get appreciated, the character or the sketch, and years later we're still talking about it because it was underappreciated.
Might not have necessarily appealed to the general audience, but definitely found that in group that loved them.
Mm-hmm.
For $5, and it's tough for me to put him down so low, but Kyle Mooney, who
for $1.
For $1, sorry. And I always expected more. And what I got was really funny, but maybe they didn't use him enough. I don't know. Maybe they expected him to fill in for Andy Samberg, and he wasn't that type of guy.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about because you and I both love Kyle Mooney, but there's not real one sketch or one character where I can point to be like, oh, you should love him too because of this. It's just like a general vibe from Kyle Mooney.
I can point to Bruce Chandling.
It's probably the best one.
I love Bruce Chandling when he did Baby Yoda. Dugay from those 90s sitcom ripoffs.
Yeah.
Those were always funny. But usually it was just him playing someone like himself, maybe a wimp, or he would do a pre-tape sketch.
Yes, indeed.
Will Forte from 02 to 2010, just constantly doing his own thing and just giving you these weird voices and weird sketches. And I think the best way to like Tim Calhoun, who was constantly on the show with him doing that, I am Tim Calhoun. And so like guys like that, the Falconer, MacGruber, John Bovey member, or one of his best sketches is when he's a sex offender who goes door to door trick or treating to tell people in the neighborhood that he is one.
Forte is a bit like Dana Carvey, where I think if you talk to all these cast members, he's on the short list of being one of the funniest ones. And he crossed over his weird time from 02 to 2010. He crossed over with so many cast members because there was a lot of changeover in that 8-9 year period. That I feel like he never really got the chance to shine because he didn't have the same consistent players year in and year out. But he's certainly someone now in 2025 that we look back on and like, oh, that's, we should have appreciated that more.
For $3 and outside the box is Tracy Morgan from 96 to 03, someone that is so unique. He might be the one that is people do impressions of the most on like the show. And like
Yes.
because he is such a character. And I'm not sure if they let him shine enough on the show. You really saw it on 30 Rock where they let him
That's right.
just be himself. But Astronaut Jones, Dominican Lou, Brian Fellows, Uncle Jemima, he made Pure Mash. And then he'd do, they'd usually have him do like the, black women because they didn't have one in the cast. So Star Jones and Maya Angelou.
Star Jones is so good.
It was
Tracy
really
Morgan, I think he ended up, as Goose said, getting his flowers after 30 Rock, but certainly underappreciated during his time on SNL.
For $4, Fred Armisen, who was on the show from 02 to 13. That is a long, long time. But just so many unique and weird characters on the show. And like, so Prince, like that is such an amazing impression. And he put that little spin on it too. He was also Osama bin Laden, Larry King, Ice-T, George Lopez, Barack Obama. So he was almost like he could pull off any race. And they'd say, all right, we need someone to do this. Fred, go ahead and hop on.
Fred Armisen, I'm a little bummed he's so high here. I was hoping to get him at like $2. I fucking love Fred Armisen. Maybe outside of Will Ferrell, my favorite SNL cast member ever.
Really?
He's such a chameleon. He can do anything you want him to do. He's the type of character that when he pops up and a cameo on a television show, it's one of the best episodes that show has had. The character is insanely memorable. He's just so weird. Maybe the weirdest person they've ever had as a cast member. And I love everything about Fred Armisen.
Now, you could argue maybe him at the top of this one, but I think because this next guy brought SNL into the digital age and put him online and kept them relevant. Exactly. And that is Andy Samberg from 05 to 12. He did have some live characters like Blizzard Man, or when he'd have a Quado in his stomach who would offer you smints. But, everyone knows him from over 100 digital shorts.
Yeah, he changed the way that we looked at SNL. He changed the way Lauren looked at SNL. He fundamentally changed the show and may have saved the show for jumping on these digital shorts early. I mean, you go back to 2005 when Samberg starts on the cast, YouTube was like just coming out then. And they got on this stuff early. Yeah, they got on this stuff really, really early and honestly probably helped propel SNL into this new age era.
He also tells a story that after Lazy Sunday, so first off, with the show, they put all the sketches up in cue cards. And the laminated ones are the monologue and weekend update. After they did Dick in a Box, they had a laminated digital short that had to go in a certain spot. So every week he had to have something in there.
Yeah, which is insane. Absolutely insane.
So once again, the outside the box character that you can look at for $1, Kyle Mooney, 2, Will Forte, 3, Tracy Morgan, Fred Armisen at 4, and Andy Samberg at 5. For the next category up here, it's impressionists. And you can put a lot of guys in here, a lot of women in here, but I am looking at the people that are very well known for specifically doing voices.
Yep.
So someone that's just outside of here, and you could argue maybe putting him in there would be like James Austin Johnson, who's on the show now. He does Trump. He did Biden. He does a really good Adam Driver.
This is the guy that plays Domingo in the Domingo sketches, right?
No. He plays Trump now.
Oh, who's the guy that plays Domingo in that
I'm not
sketch?
sure. I'm blanking on his name.
Right.
Maybe he'd be higher if they didn't waste 4 years of using Alec Baldwin as Trump, and maybe they brought him in there earlier. By the way, I'm not a fan of them bringing in celebrities to play politicians or whatever it is. Make a star out of your own people.
Yes, sir.
For $1, someone who's great, and I mentioned earlier doing impressions and singing as certain celebrities, and that is Melissa Villaseñor.
Villaseñor. Yeah.
Thank you. Melissa Villaseñor, who was on the show from 16 to 22, Celine Dion, Kathy Griffin, Lady Gaga, Gwen Stefani, Sarah Silverman, Owen Wilson is a very, very funny one, Dolly Parton, and Christina Aguilera.
Yeah, one of the first SNL castings that she was discovered on YouTube. She was
Oh,
not incredibly famous, but became pretty popular on YouTube because of her impressions and her own online presence. Eventually made it onto SNL a decade ago. Honestly, for $1, that's great value. She's super, super
yeah.
talented, but she came up in this era of the show where the ratings weren't great. I don't think a lot of people would maybe compare her to the greats, but she is truly one of the best impressionists they've ever had.
Someone who was always trying to leave off of this because he tries to shoehorn himself into everything.
Yeah,
And that is, and I couldn't because he was a big star on the show. And that's Jimmy
significant.
Fallon from 98 to 04. Adam Sandler, Barry Gibb, Chris Rock, Dave Matthews, Robin Williams, French Stewart, Gilbert Godfrey, Howard Stern, Jerry Seinfeld, Mick Jagger. And what I do respect about him is on the show, he would do an impression once, and that was it.
Here's the thing I'll say about Jimmy Fallon. All the negative things and detractors of Jimmy Fallon, I'm not going to say you're wrong. But when Jimmy Fallon was really good, he was fucking great. He is super talented. The issue is he'd break 90% of the time.
Yes.
And there's just something unlikable about Jimmy Fallon. I don't know what it is, but he truly is one of the more talented cast members they've ever had. And so I think he absolutely deserved to be on here.
Also, with Andy Samberg, his audition is his character was Jimmy Fallon at a funeral. So he just go, oh, wow, this is so great. Guys, you having so much fun right now? Guys, what do you think? Pretty good. For $3 an impression is Chloe Fineman, who is 2019, still currently in the cast. She does Drew Barrymore, Britney Spears, Nicole Kidman, JoJo Siwa, Ana de Armas, Carol Baskin, Jennifer Coolidge, Jamie Lee Curtis, Natasha Lyonne. And what's great about her, they're pretty much dead-on impressions.
Yeah, she's phenomenal, and I think she's going to continue to have a great run for years and years now.
For $4, and currently is the announcer of the show, is Daryl Hammond, who pretty much for 14 years played every white politician.
I think it was almost a game at one point. They're like, all right, we're going to have so-and-so politician or old white on, and let's see if Daryl Hammond could play him. And Daryl Hammond could every single time. Daryl Hammond is so good.
Yep, nothing flashy. He's you put him in the lineup, you expect the same thing every week. He's probably most well-known for his Bill Clinton impression. Mm-hmm. But I would take Phil Hartman, who put a little stank on it, a little different, not dead on, but that's just me.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's how do you want your impressions? Do you want them played to a T so that they're actually copying the person, what Daryl Hammond would essentially do? Or do you want the stank that someone might put on it? And it's truly up to whoever's watching.
$4 or $5, someone who did dead on impressions from 2010 to 2016, $4 or $5, I think deservingly is the $5 person here, because anytime that he was on the screen during his time on SNL, you're like, let me see what he's going to do.
Yeah,
and that is Jay Farrell.
Yeah, sorry. Jay Farrell. I didn't mean to step on you there. This is, if you were to close your eyes and listen to Jay Farrell do any of his characters, you would think it's the character talking. It's fucking insane how talented he is at manipulating his voice and his cadence to sound exactly like
and physical, like how he would start
and then on top of it, becoming
that
character physically. It's truly remarkable.
Obama, Chris Rock, Chris Tucker, Drake, Denzel, Ice Cube, Eddie Murphy, Charlie Murphy, which is even funnier, a little more obscure. I like that. Ice-T, Jay-Z, J.B. Smoove, Kanye, Cat Williams, Shaq, Lil Wayne, Shannon Sharp, Stephen A. Smith, Tracy Morgan, and Will Smith.
He's also really fun to watch him talk about these impressions, and he can seamlessly move in and out of the impressions during an interview. Yep. It's incredible how talented Jay Farrell is.
So once again, in the impressionist category for $1, Melissa Viason, your Jimmy Fallon for $2, Chloe Fineman for $3, Daryl Hammond for $4, and for $5 is Jay Farrell. Let's go on to, now while these next 5 did do some politicians or did do some impressions, I think that they are most known for bringing characters to life, and these memorable SNL characters and multiple of these characters. Let's start at the bottom. First off, just missing out is Sherry O'Terry and Anna Gasteyer. And I will say with Anna Gasteyer, especially with the past weekend of the 50th anniversary, you remember how good she was and how good she is with the not just the speaking, but the singing that goes into the show as well. But for $1, I have him on here because he was the only one that was saved in a cast that no one liked, and that's John Lovitz, who played Annoying Man, the master thespian, and Tommy Flanagan, the pathological liar, who said, "That's the ticket," and he's married to Morgan Fairchild.
I think this is the hardest category to quantify or build, because a lot of the best character specialists we just talked about in the 2 or 3 categories above. However, these are sort of leftovers who could have been in those characters or in those categories, but we found a spot for them here, and all maybe supremely talented, but maybe never the best character while they were on the show, or best member while they were
I
on the
think the
cast.
top two here you could argue would be, but
I agree with the top 2.
but
Yeah.
never did the impressions. It was more just the
true.
amazing characters.
That's true.
So the top two, I would say you could look at as possibly being an anchor character. But let's move on to Gilda Radner for $2 from 75 to 80. Baba Wawa, Emily Latella, Rosanna Dana. It's not my style of SNL, but I'm always told that she was amazing.
This is Emma Stone's favorite SNL cast member, and Rosanna Dana is her favorite character. How about that?
Amy Poehler from 01 to 08. She played Amber, the character who had one leg and couldn't control her farts. And then Caitlin, the hyper kid.
I love Amy Poehler, but when she was on SNL, she was never like the lead, or she was good, but she certainly shined once she left SNL. She became much more famous once she left SNL.
So these next two, you could flip back and forth with the $4 and the $5. I think these two are amazing with their characters, created these characters. One person has movies that are based on these characters. These two could also be anchors. You could argue them as anchors. But for $4 is Kristen Wiig, who was on the show from 05 to 12. Aunt Linda, who did the movie reviews. Dunice, who's a little baby hands on the Lawrence Welk show. Hilarious. The female a-hole, Gilly. Judy Grimes, Kat, who she would go on Weekend Update and sing with Fred Armisen. Any old-timey female character, she would jump in there as well. So like a Judy Garland, Don't Make Me Dance. Penelope, the nervous one-upper, and then the Target lady.
Yeah, Kristen Wiig is beloved by all, as she should be. The Wiig and Hader era is pretty underrated, and I think we could probably interchange these two. You could have maybe put Wiig up in anchors and Hader here. They're equally as valuable to that show's success during their time, but I have nothing bad to say about Kristen Wiig.
I think that was the only conversation that we had was, who do we put in the anchor? Do we do Kristen Wiig or Bill Hader?
It's a toss-up. I'd be fine switching them, but I think we were like 51% Hader as the anchor.
And for $5 in the category of character specialist is Mike Myers from 89 to 95. Dieter, Wayne, Linda Richmond, Philip the Bath Boy. Yeah, that's what it is. And then Simon the Hyper Hypo.
Yeah, we got to reap a lot of the benefits as children of Mike Myers' fame as a movie star and movie characters, and taking a lot of his SNL basis and turning it into great success on the big screen. So we love Mike Myers, but it's actually for non-SNL things. And then obviously you go back and discover it becomes because of his SNL stuff.
Austin Powers, Dr. Evil is an impression of Lorne Michaels. And it's almost a ripoff of Dana Carvey's Lorne Michaels.
Yes, right.
Which they've had arguments about in the past.
Here's a question for you, and I think maybe the folks at home may be wondering this. If there is someone that we don't mention in a certain category, can we have a write-in for $1 for this character?
Yeah. Yes.
I would like to submit here Rachel Dratch for $1 as a character.
Dratch is a good one. And I think I had her in there at the beginning, but then she got pushed out by everyone else. But Dratch is very good. Zazu.
She makes me laugh every single time.
Debbie Downer. Yeah, I agree. So for $1 in the category of character specialist, John Lovitz. 2 is Gilda Radner. 3, Amy Poehler. 4, Kristen Wiig. And for $5 is Mike Myers. Now let's go to the update anchor. The every episode, you got someone telling jokes in the middle about the current affairs of what's going on in the world. And there's a lot to choose from, but I feel good with our choices.
Yeah, this might be the category that people would argue most about who's missing, where they should be numbered.
Yeah.
When I told one of my friends we were doing this last week, and I like, we'll have an update anchor, and they were like, "Oh, I know who I'm going to get probably for a steal." And I was like, "Is it this person?" And they're like, "Yeah." I was like, "That's our $5 person. You don't
Yeah.
know McAdoo at all, do you?"
Right. And then also, like Mac just said, and that's a good idea, is that anyone that's not, first off, they can't be in another category. But if they're
Yes.
just a free agent out of the 50 people that we did not mention, you can use them for $1 in anything. But for $1 here is Seth Meyers, who was on the update desk from 06 to 14. Solid, not my favorite, pretty straightforward.
Seth Meyers is like, I don't know. We got Jimmy Fallon at home type. That's like sort of what he became.
I think
And then
Meyers was better at Weekend Update than Fallon.
I agree, but he was sort of in the same vein. And then he followed the Jimmy Fallon path to late night. I actually really like Seth Meyers. I think a lot of people really like Seth Meyers, and he's not as zany, I guess, as Fallon became. So his legacy is maybe a little bit better than Jimmy Fallon's.
Someone that brought Weekend Update back after years of it gone away, and that is Dennis Miller, who was on the desk from 85 to 91. And he was also, he might be the archetype of like what everyone then made Weekend Update.
Yeah, I agree. He definitely set that role in motion and
Yeah.
really defined what it's become.
From 14 until now, and I couldn't separate these two because they've been on the desk together the entire time, is Colin Jost and Michael Che.
Yeah, this might be your best value since we're giving you a 2-for-1 here. But I think truly and wholeheartedly, the best stuff that SNL has done over the last decade is Jost and Che joke swapping at the end
Yeah.
of every season. It's truly the funniest stuff they've done for the last decade.
$4. And yes, she had a co-host both times, but I think she was the one that kind of kept the glue together with both of them. And that is Tina Fey, who was on the desk from 2000 to 06. She did the co-host with Jimmy Fallon and Amy Poehler.
Yeah, and when you're getting Faye, you could maybe argue that her writing alone in the background helps your cast out a lot. So, sneaky, someone that you don't remember a ton from sketches, but she was an invaluable member of Weekend Update and obviously a great writer.
And for $5 in the category of update anchor, someone who was fired off the desk for not being funny is Norm Macdonald.
If you don't know anything about Mac and Goo, if you're tuning in for the first time ever, for anyone that's under the age of 40, I think Goo and I are the two biggest Norm Macdonald fans on planet Earth. And I fully mean that. I don't know, because like I was never watching SNL when he was the Weekend Update guy. My first introduction to Norm Macdonald was Billy Madison. Like, I didn't know who Norm Macdonald was until many, many years later. It helps that my father's a big Norm fan and fed me a little bit of that. But discovering who Norm is when you're like 15, 16, 17 and getting on that same wavelength is the best. Because there are people to this day, and that'll never get on Norm's wavelength, that'll never understand his joke telling. And I'm not saying we're smarter than you, but if you don't subscribe to Norm Macdonald's comedy, you shouldn't be listening to this podcast. I think he's the single greatest update anchor of all time. Honestly, in our lifetime, our 35 years on this planet, I think the most underrated comedian that walked this earth and maybe ever. Like, he never truly got his chance to shine, which is a real bummer. And it's good to hear how influential he's become on all these comedians over the last 15, 20, 25 years. He's just one of the most unique comedians that's ever been on this planet.
David Letterman had him on one of his final episodes, not to promote anything, just because of how funny he thinks Norm is.
Yes. And it was cool. And we saw some of this as Norm was dying, even though we didn't really know he was dying. Him talking about his love for David Letterman and for late night and stuff like that. And then, Norm started his podcast, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago. And that became a whole new iteration of really funny joke telling as well.
Well, actually, David Letterman tried to get Norm the talk show after his, but CBS would not give it to him.
And I think the single greatest nighttime clip of all time
Yes,
is
Conan
Norm
O'Brien.
on Conan O'Brien in what was that, 95, 96?
96 or 97, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it might have been actually maybe 98, right when he was fired off SNL. And of course, Conan and Norm were great friends and they loved each other. They had Courtney Thorne-Smith on promoting, what's the name
Chairman of the board.
Chairman
How
of the
could you
board.
forget chairman of the board?
I know. She's promoting it, her movie with Carrot Top, and the 2 minutes of dialogue between those three is Norm Macdonald to a T. And I don't know if anyone ever could have come up with the words that Norm put together there.
So for $1, Seth Meyers, 2, Dennis Miller, 3, Colin Jost and Michael Che. For $2, Tina Fey, and for $4, Tina Fey, and then for $5, Norm Macdonald. Let's go on to the glue guys, the characters, or the people that are able to step into any role. It's kind of like straight men, I guess. I don't know. I'm trying to get as many categories as possible here. But
I think of this more as they are very capable straight men and women, but also they can baseline do almost anything. Maybe not the best on the cast, but you ask them to play this character in this sketch, they can get it done.
So for $1, we were close to putting Mikey Day on here, by the way, but just fell off. Heidi Gardner, who's been on the show since 2017.
I love Heidi Gardner. Very underrated and very attractive.
Tim Meadows, who was on the show from 91 to 2000. And they didn't use him enough at the beginning. And then it just became a running joke that he's always been on the show. And looking back on it now, 9 years is not that long.
Yeah, and I would like to point out your T-shirt that you're wearing.
I am wearing a ladies' man T-shirt right now.
Yes.
A lady. He also played Dr. Poop in that Will Ferrell sketch when he lost Molly Shannon's baby.
So good.
Like,
Dr. Poop?
No, but I can do the robot. Bill Murray, who you could put in a bunch of other categories here. He was great. Once again, 70s SNL, not my thing, but what are you going to do?
They were still figuring out the formula.
Nick the Lounge Singer, The Nerds, Olympia Restaurants, and then for $4, an all-timer, and I think has gotten her flowers since leaving the show.
Agreed.
For how
definitely
talented she is.
Definitely did not get her flowers during her time because she was on there with Faye and Polar.
From 00 to 07, Maya Rudolph, who you could use in anything with singing, or you need a big character to like jump off the screen. It's Maya Rudolph, and then she did impressions like Beyonce, Whitney Houston, Versace.
So talented. So she probably she should have been the 1A to Will Ferrell while she was there, and of course she outlasted Ferrell, but I don't think she got her proper opportunity to shine.
And then the reason why this category was made, because we had to put Kenan Thompson somewhere. He's been on the show for 22 seasons, I believe. Kenan Thompson is, when a sketch needs a laugh, he'll find a way to at least get a giggle out of you.
Does anyone love Kenan Thompson? No. Does anyone hate
I love him on the show.
Does anyone hate Kenan Thompson? No. Kenan Thompson just exists, and he's good at what he does.
He is good at what he does. And he's deserving of the $5. He's been there for so long.
I agree. Yep.
So the glue guys for $1, Heidi Gardner, $2, Tim Meadows, $3, Bill Murray, $4, Maya Rudolph, and for $5, Kenan Thompson. I know I will not be using my $5 on a glue guy, but that is just me. Let's move on to a very important attribute for someone to have, maybe if you aren't the best at line delivery or telling jokes, and that is just being a great physical comedian. And that's what the show was for a very long time. The first 5 years is all jumping through tables, jumping off stages, falling off ladders.
Yeah, and then it went away for a really long time until you maybe got the best ever at it to come back in the 90s to do it. And I also think we could call this the honorary Dane Cook Award, even though it's not an award.
That's a good point. So what I would say is that the person Mac was talking about as the one who brought it back is for $1, Chris Kattan.
That is not who I am talking about, but I have a soft spot. Well, I know Goo definitely does.
I
I
love
have a
Chris
soft
Kattan.
spot for Chris Kattan because it never should work. Anything Chris Kattan did never ever should have worked, and it just did because he's so like the way he moves his body and as
Yes.
skinny as he is, like it's just I don't know. He figured out a way to make it work.
So he's different from everyone else on this list because he's not someone that's falling through sets or jumping through tables. He would just physically move around different than everyone else. And probably his most physical character would be Mr. Peepers.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yep.
The person who brought physical comedy to this show is Chevy Chase. We had to find a spot for him, and no one fell off a ladder like him.
The person who I would like to do physical harm to most out of this cast might be Chevy Chase.
Someone that does not get enough credit for her time on the show. And when you watch the highlight reel of the physical comedy that is done on the show that happened in the 50th episode that they just, the 50th anniversary episode that they just did, you forget Molly Shannon throwing herself into like 10 chairs and like throwing herself off of a stage into like this like really dangerous shit. And you wonder, how is she still physically able to walk?
Yeah, she really became the secondary star during Will Ferrell's time, and it was rightfully so. You know, I know, like I said, Maya Rudolph was maybe underutilized, but they had just had so much talent
Yeah.
in that late '90s, early 2000s, and Molly Shannon deserved everything she got. I mean, she was one of the first SNL members to get their own movie, you know, based on an SNL character. So that tells you how good she was.
And like not only Mary Catherine Gallagher, where she really just put her body through the fucking grinder for, but like the I'm 50 lady, you know, kick, stretch, kick, which she still does great.
Yeah, she does a really good job. Like Molly Shannon, if she really wanted to doll herself up, would be a gorgeous woman, but she like purposefully never did
Doing?
to lean into
I don't know
like
what you're doing right now.
the same way Will Ferrell put on 40 pounds because it was funnier to be flabby than have the six pack that he had when he was 20 years old. Like she really leaned into the facial things that she does. And if you were a more attractive woman, they wouldn't play up as well.
Now, these next two, once again, like a lot of these other categories, you could flip these two around. I think we have them in the right order. The first person, other than Chevy Chase, that was really known for the physical comedy on this show is John Belushi, he had a great way of just throwing himself on the ground.
Yeah, he is, I think, you know, you talk about Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Chevy Chase. That early class, I feel like everyone's favorite cast member was John Belushi.
Yes, because he was also, like, he knew that he was the heavier of the bunch, but he was so agile.
Yeah, it was great. Great.
Speaking of being heavy and agile, of course, the Chippendales, that is what put him on the map, and that is Chris Farley, who, you know, it kind of did bad things to his psyche to be the, you know, fat guy go boom. But Chris Farley, his physical comedy is unmatched.
Yeah, you've had, I would say, you know, 30 years of people trying to replicate what Chris Farley did, but they're never going to be able to do it. And the fact that Chris Farley was able to do it 20 years into this show is truly impressive. And if you look up, you know, greatest SNL sketches ever, it's heavy on the Farley because Farley was so fucking good at physical comedy. It obviously helped that he was 350 pounds, but the way he sold it was really the magic.
All right, in the category of physical, for $1, Chris Kattan, 2, Chevy Chase, 3, Molly Shannon, 4, John Belushi, and for $5, Chris Farley. Let's go on to this next category that probably should have been after Weekend Update anchors, and this is where new people come to cut their teeth, give you new characters, do a quick impression, and that is Update Walk-On. And this is where some people really made names for themselves. And someone that just missed out, but you could take him for $1 if you want, is Bowen Yang, who is currently on the show, but he does really good work with his walk-ons.
Yeah, I love Bowen Yang. He's great.
Then you go $1 once again. Bobby Moynihan, who was on the show from 08 to 17. He did, you know, Snooki, Anthony Crispino, Riblet, who they used a ton. Not my favorite character, but the character that he was known the most for by the end was Drunk Uncle.
Yeah, Bobby Moynihan is very good.
Then you go to And David Spade talks about this. He was on the show from 1990 until 96. Is that they always told him do some walk-ons, do this, do that, and he never thought about actually doing it until his final couple years, where that's what everyone knows him for, doing Spade on Hollywood.
Yeah, I also feel like we missed an opportunity for him to be a really great Weekend Update anchor. He just never really got the chance.
He might be too mean and too I don't know.
Yeah, but Norm's really mean. He's just, I guess Norm's better at hiding the mean or the way he presents.
He's pretty mean. No.
Yeah, it's true.
I think Norm's delivery of punchlines is better, but Spade's a good stand-up too. Yes.
Totally.
Then you go for $3, Pete Davidson, who would just do himself.
I love Pete Davidson, unapologetically. I've always found Pete Davidson very funny. Of course, he's had his own ups and downs, but I've always found Pete very funny.
You can now flip these next two people if you really wanted to, but for $4, someone who was actually a Weekend Update anchor, but because she was so good at doing the walk-ons, it made more sense for her to do this, and that is Cecily Strong. And the girl you wish you shouldn't have, or the girl you wish you hadn't started a conversation with at a party is the one that she is known for, but she also did countless just yelly roles that she would
Janine
always
Pirro.
nail. Yes.
Yeah. I love Cecily unapologetically. She could have fallen into a couple other categories too. She could be a good glue girl as well.
Yeah.
Cecily, I think Cecily's starting to get her flowers now. The more people looking back on that era, she's super, super talented.
And then finally, someone who made his name doing the update walk-ons. This is back when Kevin Nealon was on, and then a little bit with Norm Macdonald, and that is Adam Sandler from 91 to 95. He got his offbeat characters on the show this way. Cajun Man, Opera Man, the Halloween costume idea guy, or just himself singing.
Yeah, it's the perfect way for Sandler comedy to affect the show because you couldn't really build sketches around a lot of what he was doing. So the update walk-ons were fucking perfect.
90 seconds at the most.
Yeah.
We don't need anything more than that. So for $1, Bobby Moynihan, 2, David Spade, 3, Pete Davidson, 4, Cecily Strong, and for $5 in the update walk-on is Adam Sandler. And then finally, because we needed 10 categories and we were really stretching this, I just said Patchwork, someone that was brought in for a season or two. That were
Flex Seal.
They were already known. They were already a famous comedic actor, but because we had fallen on hard times, we had lost the original cast. We had, we needed someone to fill in.
It's like a transition period.
We needed someone to fill in after Phil Hartman left. So we needed like an older gentleman to fill this role. So for $1, we have that person here, Michael McKean, who was known as Squiggy at the time, or Lenny. Lenny or Squiggy. And I'm a fan of Laverne and Shirley, and I don't know. He was Squiggy. I'm going to say Squiggy. I might be wrong, though.
Sure. 50-50
He also reprised his role when John Travolta was the host, and they did a big Welcome Back Kotter sketch, and then he played Squiggy in it, and they brought the guy that played Lenny, or Squiggy. I don't know which one's which. Christopher Guest, who, along with 2 other people on this list, were brought in to right the ship in 84-85. Mm-hmm. Someone who was never technically in the cast, but he pretty much was there every week for 4 years, and that's Alec Baldwin.
Yeah, I still think he did a great Trump. He just kind of overstayed his welcome.
Then you go to the 2 guys, and you could flip these 2 people. Really could. I might flip them right now. I don't know. But I feel like the $5 person is is really well known for what he did on the show. Yeah. Martin Short at $4. And then Billy Crystal at $5.
Yeah, it's tough to separate them because they were the same era, and they are. Billy Crystal is more famous, I guess. Mm-hmm. But in the comedy world, Martin Short probably gets more flowers than Billy Crystal does. So I don't. Yeah, it's a good one.
I was thinking about this the other day. I think that Martin Short might be to a mass audience, maybe the funniest person ever.
He is the most Dana Carvey person they've ever had. That's not Dana Carvey and didn't quite get to those levels, but he's very much in the same vein.
No, because I think that Martin Short can still step on stage with any audience and make them laugh.
You don't think Dana Carvey can?
I don't know. Dana Carvey might not be in his prime anymore. I think that Martin Short has just continued his prime.
Martin Short is a zanier version, I suppose. Yeah, he's more out there. But if you're talking about what he was doing in contributing to the show, it was Dana Carvey.
All right, so once again, Patchwork for $1, Michael McKean, 2, Christopher Guest, 3, Alec Baldwin, 4, Martin Short, and for $5, Billy Crystal. I don't need to go through all these categories and people again, do I?
No, they can jump back and scroll through it if they'd like. Just once again, we'll name the categories. There was 10 of them. We just did patchwork,
Yeah.
update walk-ons, physical comedy, glue guys, update anchors, character specialists, impressionists, outside the box characters, straight men and or women, and your anchors. So that's 10 categories. We'll have a graphic up for you at some point, but tweet at us your lineups and we'll retweet those and criticize them. I haven't even attempted to build mine yet.
No,
So
I
I'm
haven't
looking
either.
forward.
I wanted
Yeah.
to build this for the people. I'll tell you right now, just looking at the list really quick, I would try and find a way to get Will Ferrell in there. I think I could take a little bit less on the straight man. A $2 Chris Parnell makes sense to me. Outside the box, I know you might go Fred Armisen. I kind of need Andy Samberg. He did something that no one else did up to that point or has done since.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's gonna be tough. The math's gonna be tough because I
Yeah.
know my problem's gonna be I'm gonna start with Farrell and Norm Macdonald, which is two $5, and then I'm
I
gonna
would
have
also
8
take Norm
categories
Macdonald.
to fill with $20. So I'm kind of porked there. So I think it's gonna be a lot of $1 and $2 rolls here.
Right. So I might skimp on the impressionist and go with either Fallon or Villasenor. Character specialists. Fuck, I don't want John Lovitz.
I'm writing in Rachel Dratch for me for $1 there.
Update anchor Norm Macdonald is going to be there for me. Glue guy, I'll take someone less. I'll take a Tim Meadows. I'm fine with that.
I'll take Heidi Gardner. I'm cool with that.
Physical comedy, I'll go with Molly Shannon. That's a
that's going to be a tough
middle.
One. Yeah.
There's
a lot of value in
there. Yeah.
A lot of value in the $3 characters here. A lot of the 4 and 5s are obviously great, but the $3 ones is probably where you're going to find your best values.
Update walk on, I'll take Bobby Moynihan. I'll just take a $1 there. If I'm trying to make the math work, I think he makes sense. And then patchwork, I mean, I'm not attached to like this season of SNL, so I'll take Michael McKean. I don't give a shit.
Let's get into Max Sack.
And Mac, that could be anything. It could be about Mac. I know that you have not watched it yet, but we are fresh off of the 50th anniversary weekend for SNL. I really enjoyed the Friday night 3-hour music extravaganza. I really liked what
I heard
they did.
It was fucking phenomenal.
Yes, I love what they did with their own stuff, not just the celebrities and the musicians that they brought in. Have you had a chance to watch Post Nirvana?
So I heard about 30 seconds of it. I didn't care for it, man. I don't know.
While I love the fact that Post Malone is getting these opportunities, he seems like genuinely a very, very nice person. And I like that he's getting all these opportunities. I'm not sure. And, saying this, like Kurt Cobain was not a great singer. I'm not sure if this is in Post Malone's Q zone.
Well, saying that, I don't think Post Malone's a great singer. I think Post Malone is not a bad singer, but he lacks the power. He's got some raspiness that Kurt Cobain had, but he doesn't have the power that Kurt Cobain had in his voice. Yeah. And in the 30-second clip I saw, it was, I don't know if I want to say cringeworthy, but I'm like, this is not it. No, thank you.
I think I prefer anytime that they've done a reunion show over the last 40 years or however much time, they've always had a female vocalist, and I think that's worked better.
Yeah, that makes more sense, I think.
The Andy Samberg stuff, the Lonely Island stuff is the highlight of the night for me on that. I also love they brought the Culps back, which is Will Ferrell and Anna Gasteyer. That was hilarious. I also loved Tracy Morgan going up there and doing Astronaut Jones.
I also heard that Gaga did Dick in a Box.
Yes. Fantastic.
So good.
So that was the Friday night. And then Sunday night was the 3.5-hour 50th anniversary show.
Was that how long the show was?
Yes.
Holy shit.
There are so many parts in it that I'm just like, this is a 50th anniversary show, and this is what you're giving me? You have so many years of great comedic actors, and you feel the need to shove a celebrity in this area, or you're giving me this stupid Domingo sketch that just came out, and now this is the third time that you've done it in a single year. Am I just too old to understand that sketch?
Listen, the song is catchy, so the Domingo sketch became catchy. I don't know if I laughed once in the 6 months that it's been around. It's
They've had
fine.
2 of them on the regular show, and then they did it in
Yeah.
the 50th anniversary.
They did Espresso, and then they did a Chapel Roan song the second time around. What song did they use on the 50th?
They used Espresso by the end because Sabrina Carpenter was in the sketch.
Okay,
Sabrina
fair enough.
Carpenter in more sketches on this show than most of the people that have been on the show.
She is very talented. She is pretty
She is.
funny
I'm not
and
going to
very
argue.
self-aware.
Also, amazing Eddie Murphy doing his Tracy Morgan impression on Black Jeopardy. Black Jeopardy was hilarious until I feel like they fumbled the end of it because they brought the Tom Hanks character back without giving you any of the backstory or the build-up to what made that original one funny.
Okay. But I suppose if you're watching SNL 50, you probably have
I know,
the
but
backstory.
But you still need to, give us something. And they, Eddie Murphy just, walked off the stage without finishing his Tracy Morgan stuff. And then they brought Eddie Murphy back at the end doing the Scared Straight with Keenan. And for the first time in SNL history, you saw Eddie Murphy and Will Ferrell on the stage together. That is
Awesome.
something. Yeah.
That is cool. Yeah, I really like that.
So,
Are you telling me, I got 6 hours of content, 6.5 hours of content to catch up on? Fucking hey.
I would say it, but one thing that I do like about it is that it's like any SNL episode where there's some really bad stuff and you might find something good.
Okay. All right. Good enough.
Also, Mac, I just talked about their 50th anniversary. Did you know that this is our 500th episode?
Is it really?
Yes.
Part 2. So our 500 on this channel. Yes.
500th on this channel and specific to episodes, not including news dumps.
So we're actually at 8,000.
We're around 8,000.
Credit to us. So in order to sell, you know what? It's not that it's not fitting us celebrating SNL for our 500th episode.
All right. Where can the folks find us?
You can find us on Twitter and on Instagram at Mac and Goo Podcast. Every other platform, we are Mac & Goo. That includes
this is our 500th episode, and you are now
we're on the other stuff.
Yeah.
As Mac & Goo, Mac Shift 7 Goo. That includes Facebook, Stitcher, TuneIn, Castbox, Spreaker, Google Play, iHeartRadio. We're on Spotify, but more importantly, we're on Apple Podcasts. Get on there, rate, review, subscribe, 5 stars. If you do that, we may or may not send you a free Mac and Goo t-shirt for the folks over at Watertown Sportswear.
Yeah,
that's Watertown Sportswear, 34 Mount Auburn Street in Watertown, Massachusetts. WatertownSportswear.com, expert screen printing and embroidery.
tpublic.com merch. Check us out at the end of the week. Maybe we'll do a 500th episode. Who knows? Even though it's number 501, or we'll do a news dump. Who knows?
We'll rank Major League Baseball's 500 home run hitters.
Right. That's a good idea. There's not a lot of them, so we can do that in 15, 20 minutes.
What do you think? There's like 20 of them?
It's got to be like 40 now.
No, because I think there's 6 that have gotten to 600. Does that sound right? And 3 that have gotten to 700? I'm going to say there's 25 500 home run hitters.
Yeah. How many 500 home run? 28.
Oh, all right.
Nice.
All around it. Right around it.
We're split in the middle. You said 25. I said 40. Right in the middle of that.
Good enough. I win because I didn't go over, but what are you going to do?
Price is Right rules, but flip it. So I actually won. Tuesdays are Goose Days. I abuse kangaroos. Tim Burton.
Bye.
Please flip the cassette over to side B to continue the adventure.
Now it's time for girls jumping on trampolines.